Hey again, humans. This is Stories from a Different Perspective by J.L. Sweeney, as told by Argus Truin. I am Argus Truin. Last time, we talked about analyzing the situation. Now, when you come to your conclusion, are you strong enough to stand by that, or are you going to let others push you around and back down when the time really comes? I guess we'll see. This is the dollar bill, part 2. We're talking about Briggs just got killed, if you remember, and Aaron Jacks watched the girl die, and it freaked him out. So here we are with Aaron Jacks. A very smart, sly real estate lawyer, Jacks had used his talents and made himself very wealthy off other people's misery. He had caused a great deal of heartache during his career, but it never actually physically hurt anyone, and he had never seen anyone die. It had freaked him out. He arrived at Zero's place 45 minutes later, a drive that legally would have taken an hour and a half. Shaking like an epileptic in seizure, Jacks crawled from his Jaguar and pounded on Zero's door. Amanda opened the door and smiled. Jacks pushed past her and headed for Zero's party room. "Fuck you too," Amanda said as he ran by. Zero was sitting at a table lining out some rails for himself when Jacks burst in. "So what the fuck do you think you're doing?" Zero said, glaring at him. "Man, I need some blow. Bad. And I need it right now," Jack stuttered, and proceeded to tell Zero what he had just seen. "Fucking A, man. Pretty bizarre if you ask me," Zero nodded. "You know this shit ain't free, but for telling me this cool story, I only charge you half price." Jax let out a deep breath and tried to calm down while Zero measured out an ounce and spooned it into a bag. He slid the bag to Jax. "This one here," Zero said, pointing at a huge line of dope, "is on me." Jax took $1 out of his pocket, rolled it tightly, and ran the line, not noticing that it had red eyes and lips. He leaned back, enjoying the burning sensation of the cocaine. "Shit, man, thanks," Jax said, handing the rolled-up dollar to Zero. "No problem, man. Shit, you bring me in enough business. Gotta take care of your people, you know," Zero said, and ran his own line. After relaxing a bit, Jax decided it was time to go. "I gotta bail. Thanks again, Z." He picked up the bill and the bag and put them into his pocket. "Cheap bastard," Zero thought to himself. Jack shook hands with Zero and hugged Amanda. "I'm sorry about earlier," he whispered in her ear. "Oh, biggie." She smiled and gave him a peck on the cheek. She walked him to the door and let him out. Jax trotted over and jumped into his car without opening the door. He felt much better with the top down on his Jag and the cool wind blowing through his hair. He decided he needed another line before he got home, but he didn't feel like stopping to get the job done. Smiling, he opened the glove compartment and took out the small hand mirror he kept for just this purpose. He pulled the bag out and then rolled up the bill. He pulled the bag and the rolled up bill out of his pocket and took a deep breath. Opening his bag, he spread a small amount on the mirror and, while trying to keep his eye on the road, began to cut it up and line it out. Looking down at the mirror for a second too long cost Jax his life. He looked up and discovered that he was not rounding the next corner. Letting go of the mirror and the dollar bill, he grabbed the wheel and jerked. He was way too late and heard the scratching of the gravel as his tires lost traction. The car slid sideways and broadsided a tree, sending Jack shooting out of the open car like a missile. He smashed into another tree 14 feet above the ground, dying quickly, his flesh seeming to meld with the tree bark and his blood draining rapidly down the trunk. The red bill had become unrolled when Jax had thrown it and had landed in the road, red eyes glittering with pleasure and malice as it watched Jax's body dangle from the tree. Zero heard the back door crash open and ran for his pistol. He grabbed his Glock and slipped cautiously through the house, hearing noises in the living room. Peeking his head through the door, he found Amanda being held by Andre Sidonio. "Zero," Andre said, rolling his R's. Zero was about to answer when he felt something hit the back of his head. As he fell, his last sight was of Amanda being beaten by Sidonio. Andre and his men tortured Zero and Amanda for 2 days before killing them. Zero had learned the drug dealer's hard lesson. It's nothing personal, it's just business, and it is a must to keep one's connections paid, especially when they are the type of connections who kill people for the hell of it. Old Harry, had been homeless for about 5 years. He was hard of hearing, and his sight had been going for the last year or so, but he continued to scavenge whatever he could and didn't mind sleeping under the stars except during the winter. Being the curious type, he went to investigate the crashing noise he had heard. As he walked up the road toward the fancy car wrapped around the tree, he spotted something in the middle of the road fluttering in the breeze. He couldn't believe his eyes. It looked like $100 bill, and he knew just what he would spend it on. He quickened his pace, wanting to get it in his pocket before anyone else arrived. Grinning his old missing tooth grin, he bent down and picked up the bill. Staring hard at the red eyes and lips on the bill, Harry didn't hear the Kenworth roaring around the corner. He suddenly felt that something was wrong and looked up to see the big truck bearing down on him. He could hear the horn and the squeal of tires and could see the smoke from the tread burning on the pavement. None of this mattered since his bowels and bladder released and he froze. The collision of truck and man was like something out of a cartoon. It left a bloody, hairy shape in the grill of the truck, and puffs of dust sprang up from around his feet as his body was catapulted into the branches next to Jack's, to hang like a pair of broken marionettes. The dollar bill floated to the ground with a sneer on its face. The event had all seemed like it was in slow motion to the truck driver, who, when the truck finally stopped, had a heart attack and died at the scene. Harry's shoes remained exactly where Harry had stood just seconds before. Art Belknap was a 15-year veteran on the force and had seen many accidents like this one, so it did not bother him to look at the blood and guts before him. Shaking his head, he knew this was going to be a long night. As he approached the still-running Kenworth, he caught sight of a dollar bill lying on the ground. He picked it up and noticed that it had red lips and eyes. Art shrugged and slipped the bill into his pocket. 6 hours later, the scene was cleaned up, and he went back to the city to continue his patrol. Stopping at his favorite donut shop, he bought a cup of coffee and a jelly donut. The total was $3.65, and he paid with 4 $1 bills. Moments later, he was called to a domestic dispute and responded rapidly. A husband was beating his wife and was not about to stop. Art broke down the door and, with gun drawn, ordered the man to back away from his wife. When the man followed his commands, Art moved to handcuff him. Hearing motion behind him, he glanced back and saw that the wife was pointing a pistol in his direction. Before he could say anything, the wife pulled the trigger. Art felt a burning flash of pain as his right eye disintegrated. The world began to spin and tumble, and he heard more gunshots as the vision in his remaining eye blurred and went dark. He was buried with full honors 3 days later. Ned had owned his coffee shop for about 30 years now. Many of his recipes he had invented himself. Most of his regular customers had been stopping at his place for a long time, and he always had a nice joke or a nice comment for them. Officer Belknap had been one of his best customers and stopped in daily for coffee and donuts. He hadn't even got to take a bite tonight before his radio had called him away. Ned was sorry to see him run off, but he assured him that he would save his donut for him and give him a free coffee refill. Art had nodded and ran off. Ned never saw him again. Even had Art Belknap not been killed, Art would still never have seen him again. He would not even see the morning sun. Ned loved his cat Rascal, though. He called him Rascal because he was always into everything. Ned did not know it, but Rascal had knocked over a small box of rat poison, and some of it had fallen into Ned's latest batch of donut batter. Ned was about to take a bite out of one of these new donuts when he heard the door open. He went and filled an order from a very thin-looking man, and not noticing that he gave out the red-eyed dollar bill that Officer Belknap had given him. As the man left, Ned went back to his donuts and greedily took a bite. It tasted slightly salty, and he wondered about that up to the point of sharp pain erupted in his belly. With tears filling his vision, he staggered towards the bathroom, but didn't quite make it as he power-puked onto the floor. Coffee, chewed donuts, and blood poured from his mouth. Crying, Ned made it to the bathroom and fell against the bowl. Rascal strolled casually into the bathroom and meowed at Ned. He jumped up on Ned's back and began to mix. Ned, face down in the toilet, did not reply. Gavin walked into the doctor's office and was sure something was wrong. He just didn't seem to have the appetite he used to have. He had bought some of his favorite pastries and did not feel compelled to take even one bite. Dr. Baines was waiting as Gavin was led into his office. "I have some very bad news for you, Gavin," Dr. Baines said coldly. "You've contracted HIV. It is in its advanced stages, and I estimate that you have only a month or two to live. You could get another opinion, but I don't think you would hear anything different. Dr. Baines had never showed even the slightest emotion during Gavin's previous visits, but now had a sad look in his eyes. You should probably get your affairs in order, Gavin. I'm very sorry. Gavin began to sob and cry. After a few minutes, he wiped his eyes and left without saying another word. He went straight from the doctor's office to a liquor store, where he purchased a half-gallon of vodka. Gavin noted something strange about the one of the dollar bills he gave the cashier, but had other worries on his mind. He caught the bus and headed home. His ex-boyfriend Kevin found him the next day submerged in a bloody, water-filled bathtub, empty pill bottles and a half-empty half-gallon of vodka on the toilet seat. A bloody razor blade lay open on the floor near the tub. Through his tears, Kevin heard the phone ringing. The answering machine picked up, and Kevin heard Dr. Baines telling Gavin that his test results had been mixed up with those of another man with similar conditions. Gavin would have been just fine. Joe Saiji looked at the dollar bill that the skinny, crying white man had given him and tried to copy the look on the face of the bill. He could not get the scowl just right and put the bill into his register. 11 minutes later, he was gunned down during a daytime liquor store robbery. Lyle slammed a handful of money down on the bar at the Full Moon Tavern and ordered a shot of Crown and a beer. The bartender served him, but told him when he was finished he would have to leave. Well beyond the limits of drunk, he staggered out the door and down the block toward his apartment. He crossed the street away from G's liquor store and heard a woman scream. Forcing his eyes to focus, he stared across the street at the woman, who was jumping up and down and pointing at him. Cops began to pour out of the store and run in his direction. He bolted and heard the shouts ordering him to stop. He stopped and spun, pulling out the gun that he had shot old man G with. He had never liked that old bastard anyway. The cops quickly drew their weapons and he knew he was a goner. Smiling, he aimed at a cop off to his right and squeezed the trigger. His round hit the officer in the face, but he didn't get to see the cop fall. He couldn't hear the shots, but he could feel his body jerk as the bullets from the cop's weapons hit him. During his autopsy, it was confirmed that he had been hit by 43 rounds of ammunition. Dumb bastard. Jake had always been an asshole, but when he drank, he got even worse. His ego also soared when he drank, and it was at these times that he believed he was God's gift to women. Even though there was a party back at his fraternity, where he knew he could score with those easy, slutty sorority chicks, he went to the strip joints to get drunk and horny. He and 3 of his buddies decided to start at the Full Moon Tavern and bar hop for a while before returning to the frat party. They were ordering their second round when one of the waitresses, a skanky one at that, tried the old wet the bottom of the serving tray so the money will stick to it trick. Jake caught her, and being the asshole he was, drew back and punched her in the face as hard as he could. She fell backward, spitting teeth, and knocking over another table, starting an all-out bar brawl. Jake grabbed his money, which now included the red bill, and ran for the door. All but one of his buddies made it out. Poor Jerry was almost to the door when someone raked a broken bottle across his neck. Gurgling a cry for help, Jerry was pushed back into the mob and disappeared from sight. Jake shook his head and, along with the others, hauled ass to their car. Leaving the parking lot, they heard the sound of gunfire and saw a man in the middle of the street shot down by police. Billy had been after Stacy for a long time, and this party was his last chance to take a shot at her before giving it up. He had been playing drinking games and was about to go find her when Jake and the others got back. Jake looked around and laughed nervously and suggested they sit down and start gambling. Billy jumped at the chance to hang with Jake and quickly sat down. A couple hours later, Billy had cleared out everyone at the table and was counting their money. The take was $86 and he was excited. Now he could actually take Stacy out on a real date. Stacy was upstairs where the dancing was going on, and Billy happily strutted through the rooms and up to the stairs waving his new wealth. He got to the top and someone handed him a cigar. "I am the king of gambling," he shouted, and drew out a dollar bill. "I can afford to light my cigar with money!" Everyone watched as Billy lit the red-eyed dollar bill on fire and began to puff on his cigar. As the flames reached the face on the bill, the electricity in the house went out. The flames from the burning bill changed hue from yellow to bright red, and a hideous, unearthly screech came from out of nowhere. Doors and windows slammed shut and locked. People began pushing and screaming and trying to get away, but the doors would not budge and the windows would not break. The burning bill exploded, taking Billy's hand with it and showering the booze-soaked carpet with sparks. Flames ran in trails across the carpet and began to grow in intensity. The house was on fire, and there was no escape. The screeches from the bill and the terrified screams of the burning partygoers sounded like a death metal concert. The ashes from the bill landed on the floor and were ground into the burning carpet by running feet. It was as if the bill had never existed at all. 56 college students died in the fire at Tappan New Keg Fraternity House. Terrence Ganner was not able to have his fingers reattached and took a 2-month leave of absence. When his stumps healed, he returned to work. He continues his lifestyle to this day. That is the end of the dollar bill, humans. I bid you good night, good day, good whatever. Take care, stay safe. I'm out.